You had me, or I had you.
That happens to me
All,
now.
yeah, all the time.
I'm up there volunteering in the nursery, checking babies' hearing, you know, that's one of my volunteer jobs. And these young men or women will come through and say, Mrs. Steislav, remember me? No. Well, I'm so-and-so. But I said, that was a long time ago, because here they are married and having kids, you know. And they do change, believe me. But then when they say their name, the name registers, but to recognize it, and I get that all the time.
Well, just seeing kids on Larchmont when they say, hi, Mrs. Bennett.
Yeah.
Because they have looked a lot different and older than they did before.
Well, sure.
Right, yeah. But Bev was funny. Every time she'd come, Dad'd say, okay, tell me one of your dirty jokes. I don't tell dirty jokes. Or the kids would come into the class and say, oh, Miss Haley, will you tell us this joke? I don't tell jokes. That was having to do with this piece of literature.
Oh, she was a pistol.
Oh, absolutely. But she knew Cliff for a long, long, long time. They used to play Scrabble together all the time. Yeah. Anyhow.
She's a nice lady. So,
Okay,
well, we just started our
it's
second
your turn,
film.
Gina.
Huh?
It's your turn. In this table, they took rakes and rakes.
And nobody ever would believe it till we had pictures of it. They
And-
used a hoe to scale it with.
Mhm.
Jim Burke, is that going?
Now,
Hmm?
now.
Well, the fish that Dad caught. Jim Burke, they took a board and they nailed the fish on the board and they used a garden hoe, and it's called a drumfish.
That's right.
And I don't know how much it weighed.
It's bigger than this.
Oh yeah, it was really long. Oh, aren't they pretty?
Yeah.
So anyhow, I don't know what else. Oh, I can remember on Dunbar Road we had, during the war, we had a victory garden. Oh, and we had Japanese beetles till heck wouldn't have it. And Dad took a quart jar somehow or other, and he had something in the bottom that would kill them, you know. And they would come in around and fall down in there because they just devastated everything.
That was a big, yeah, a big
Oh, they
problem.
really did. They ate the leaves of the tomato plants, and it was terrible.
But everybody had to have a victory garden because
That's
we
right.
didn't have the food. The women wore nylon, no nylon socks. They stained their leg and drew a line up the back so it looked like stockings, right?
Yep. Then we could go up to the corner because things were rationed, like your butter and your meat and so on. You had regular ration tickets.
Coupons.
And but Louis Simonovich was the name of the grocer, and he would give us credit. And then when we'd get our
Coupon books.
coupons again, then we'd have to, make up for it, because you were only allowed so much butter and so much meat.
It's like gasoline. And the coupons were like the size of blue, what was that, blue chips, blue whatever.
Blue chip stamps.
What is it?
Blue chip stamps, the little.
Yeah, blue chip
real
stamps, that's what they
green
were, little coupons like that we got. But the big thing was the 4th of July. I was telling Dad, after we moved to Toledo, every 4th of July we went back because at the corner of Hard Street and Dunbar Road, that's where the parade started. And of course it was during the war and after the war, during the war too. And the soldiers and the Marines and the Navy and the
Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts, but the tanks were there, everything was there, and marched there all through Dundalk. I don't know if they went all the way down downtown Baltimore and ended up at Dundalk High School, where they had watermelon eating contests and egg rolling contests, and then that night they had a dance and huge fireworks display in which they displayed not only the ones that flew up in the air, but they had the ones that had the presidents and Uncle Sam and the American flag. So we just couldn't miss that. That was bigger than Christmas practically.
And that's the
wasn't
only place I ever saw such a
huge.
celebration on
Yeah.
the 4th of July. We have fireworks, but they're just the kind that go up in the sky.
Like they
So-
have over at Wilshire. Right.
Right.
Yes.
Can you just turn that off in between times
Oh, yeah.
when we...
My sister Patricia was lucky. She was born in a hospital. Right?
And you were born,
And I was
Yep.
born at home.
and you were a big baby.
13 pounds, they tell me. I was born in
She
the
was
upstairs.
huge.
Yeah. upstairs bedroom, and Pap helped, and he had to bury the afterbirth. Anyhow, yeah. And then after that, but we had one bathroom, and there were the three girls. Aunt Barbara came along, and we had the one bathroom, and then the back bedroom, because we shared the one bedroom. And the back bedroom was, Uncle Muggs lived there, Aunt Ann lived there, Uncle Pierre, all Dad's brothers and sisters at one time or another lived there.
Aunt Helen.
Aunt Helen. And then when Grandpap Grandpap O'Donnell had a stroke, he came and stayed with us. And Pap said, hey, wait, Loretta, you can't keep running up and down these steps. So he put the kitchen into Grandpap O'Donnell's bedroom and made a new kitchen in the basement with a shower and a toilet and everything else, right?
Well, we called it our summer kitchen because Baltimore was so horribly hot and humid. And so what he did, cement floor, he built a wooden floor like 3-4 inches above, lattice work which divided one end of the kitchen, or the basement, which was like the kitchen part, from the furnace and the laundry, big laundry tubs and that kind of stuff. It was quite nice,
Yeah.
quite nice.
And in addition to our Victory Garden, Pap worked several jobs as well as volunteering at the church all the time. Was ever fixing something for Father Wiedenhand, who smoked like crazy. He dumped his Lucky Strike cigarettes into his pocket. I mean, his whole lips were...
This is the priest.
The pastor, right. And they'd have bingo every Friday night and trying to build a new church, and it was because it was a little wooden church, St. Rita's. Anyhow, his lips were purple, or whatever you call it, nicotine colored and stuff like that. So Pap did all of that. In addition to that, to earn money, in the basement, he dug out a whole section underneath, and we had birds, canaries, and we raised...
Which he imported from Germany.
And we raised canaries and take the strings and pull them apart and put them in, and then birds would build a nest.
Right.
And then when they laid the eggs and the eggs would hatch, you take a little bit of yellow yolk and spit on it and with a toothpick
Feed
them.
the birds. And that was when our grandfather, Nana's father, was still okay. And actually Dad did that to try to give him something to do, in a way, that part was under the kitchen. There was just a crawl space, and that's what he excavated.
Like if they would do that in our house now and dig it out underneath our house.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we had is we had an ice truck, because we had ice box, not refrigerators, and the iceman would come and put the big cake of ice.
Yeah, big one, like so.
Right.
Huh? He'd come around regularly. We would just
Put the sign
replenish it
out.
whenever.
Yeah, put the sign out, we needed ice. And I think it was like...
Oh, what about the vegetable guys that would come and they'd chant as they went up and down the streets, it was a truck full of fresh vegetables.
Yeah, I don't remember that so much, but
Yeah.
I remember because we used to, when the ice truck would come down the alley, we'd climb up into the ice truck and get some of the slivers of ice to chew on. Right. And in the back alley, we played games that we were talking about, any over the garage, and who kicked the can, and round the hole goes a big bear, bore a hole, right in there. And so much, the activity mostly took out in the backyards.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also right in front, because the grocery store,
Right.
what was the name?
That was the expensive one, though.
I know.
That was the expensive one. And right next to the alley, across from that and behind that, was the Goose Lady,
Oh,
right? Who had...
and she lived, it was a hill. It was great for sledding, because that's where we would go. But we were she was a mysterious person, so we were afraid of her, You'd do dumb things like trying to get up there and run back and, that stupid stuff. But it was fun.
Right, absolutely.
And that worked. There was an alley then, because
What did she do with the Goose Lady? She just had
she didn't do
so she
anything.
just
It was
raised them, or
just
she
all
had-
legend
And stuff. And she had
imagination
geese,
that the
So we
kids.
called her the Goose Lady. Right.
Well, yeah, but
And then down at the other end of the block, there was a tree that I can remember the kids would steal the cherries.
I
off
don't
the
remember
tree.
that.
Yeah, no, that was after your time. Hello. Would you come and join us?
Pull up a chair.
go.
I'd like to say a few words on behalf of the great state of Ohio. Once a Buckeye, always a nut. Thank you very kindly for your very kind attention. Go ahead.
The other thing we were talking about earlier is the family that lived next door to us I didn't pronounce my R's very well. And
You still don't.
Mr. You know, and I'd be outside and I'd want to go inside and I'd say, Mavo! And he'd imitate me, Mavo! Do you remember that? And then 2 doors down was Tommy Doyle. And Tommy Doyle and I played together all the time.
What?
We'd pick,
Did you play doctor?
No.
Oh.
We'd picked up dandelions and go to the railroad, the streetcar track and try to sell them as bunches of flowers. And then we'd get a can of paint and ask people if they wanted their house painted. And one time, I don't know why, we were riding our bikes and ended up at Snake Hole and never told anybody where we were going, and they were sure that we were going to drown. I don't remember what happened.
Was this an
after.
overnight visitation to
No.
Snake Hole?
No.
No.
I don't remember what happened after that at all.
How likely story.
This was when they were kids.
But
We didn't have the kind of thoughts that these kids have
At the
today.
north end.
that's right, it's not a north end. And the other thing that we used to do is slide down to the basement on the clothes post. And oh, I got a huge splinter in my bottom. And they put me on the ironing board, and everybody in the neighborhood came over to try to get that splinter out. It was the most embarrassing thing of my life.
Would you like a half a bottle of wine?
No, thank you.
Oh.
Right. Anyhow, so they were some of the things that happened in Dundalk. Then there was the time
When
my
you moved to
sister,
Toledo.
well, time when my sister Patricia, though, went to see her friend and didn't tell us. And boy, did she get into trouble because, you remember that? Would you like to relate
Her
it?
name was Pat Parr.
Pat Parr, right?
Yep. And she lived with her family. This was when I left school and walked to her house instead of
What is this?
going home. So anyhow, I just went with Pat, you know, it was after school, grade school this is. And I didn't happen to let anybody know, and they didn't know where I was. And it was strange because her parents lived in that house, but the father lived in the basement, and the mother lived upstairs, but they were separated, but weren't that kind of thing, which was kind of unusual. But her name was Pat Parr. Yep.
Oh, and Nana was so upset.
And then my kids did the same thing to me. Colleen did. She decided she wanted to walk home from school instead of take the bus in to where we live now. And she got as far as Parkside High School, you know where that is. And our neighbor, Betty Richards, who lived down the street, saw her and wondered what was going on. She stopped and she said, Colleen, you want to ride? So she did, bring her home. But Colleen's reasoning was she wanted to prove that she knew her way home from there. But anyhow.
Now
So
you
that-
asked about moving to Toledo?
All right, no, wait a minute. Before you move to Toledo, I'll tell the sleeping sickness story, and then I have to go. I have a prior appointment. During the early 30s, there was a terrible sweep of sleeping sickness all over the country, particularly in the Midwest and in Toledo. And one time when my brother and I were very, very young, and we lived at 514 LaGrange Street, our mother and father had to leave us to go someplace, and so they were gone for a couple of hours. They came back, and both of us were sleeping. One on the couch, one on the floor, unconscious. And they shook us and took us, wake up, wake up. They couldn't wake up. So we didn't have a telephone in those days. Very few people had telephones. So they picked us up, and my dad picked me up. I was a little bit bigger, and my mother picked up my brother, just a little tot, and took us and put us into the car, into the Grand Page, and rushed us to the doctor. And they just went in. There were people waiting, and they said, "Look, this is an emergency. This may be a sleeping sickness case." People got up and walked away because the damn thing was contagious. So we went in. The doctor says, "Come on in, come on in." And now you people wait outside. What happened? Well, we left him home. We came back a couple of hours later, and they fell asleep. We can't wake them up. All right, you wait outside. So they waited outside, and they were wondering and sitting there. My mother was praying and all that kind of stuff. And then finally the doctor opened the door and said, "All right, come on in." And they said, "How are they, doctor? Are they all right? Are they alive?" He said, "Yeah, they're alive." But what happened? What's the matter with them? He said, "They're drunk. Both of them are drunk. Couldn't you smell the whiskey on them?" And they said, No, we were scared. We didn't. So anyhow, they sobered us up, took us home, and got the beatings of our lives up to that point. We got further beatings further on.
Because you were
So-
naughty boys.
Well, we snuck a little Seagram 7. Okay, I have to go now. Oh.
Anyhow, that one thing she had mentioned, or somebody mentioned telephone. We had a telephone, but it was a party phone.
Oh, but before that,
Oh.
before we got our telephone, which was a party line,
Right. This is
the Edwardses,
Edwards had a
who
telephone.
lived next door, because we lived in a row house, and our house was in the middle of the row. That's the other thing. So if you locked yourself out, you had to go around you had to go down the block around to come in the back door. But anyhow, we didn't have a telephone. So her name was Eugenia Edwards. And when we'd get a telephone call, we would tell people to call there. She would knock on the door, on the window, or the wall, because, that's how, they had a signal. That meant, come over,
over
you've
and
got a telephone call,
Right.
right? Until we got our own, and then it really was a nuisance.
127,
Oh, honey, I don't remember.
Dundalk, 127, and it was a party line. Right.
I
And
have
the other
no
thing I
idea.
remember when the telephone was there, radio, we had radios. We didn't have television, but we did have a radio.
A radio.
A radio.
One.
And we got to watch or listen to things on the Sunday, in the morning, first night, or in the morning was Inner Sanctum, or the children's shows, those kind of things. But at a certain time, like at 5 o'clock at night, the news came on, Lowell Thomas, or whoever he was, we were no longer allowed the radio.
Yeah, we didn't
That
touch
was
it.
It was news broadcast at that time, half hour or whatever it was. Yes.
The
But it was-
Shadow Knows
the
was
other-
one of the programs.
Right,
we-
Inner Sanctum and that. The other thing was that it was during the war, and we had blackouts. And when you said blackouts, the curtains, it was a shade on the curtain, blacked it out completely. And if you had a pinhole, that was not allowed. It was really, because we were right there. Glen L. Martin was there, the airplane factory, and the Army bases and the Navy bases and everything was there. So we were really subject to possible attack. And Uncle Muggs was an air raid warden. And no smoking. I'm telling you, go outside with a cigarette and you're in really bad trouble. So that was, although, I didn't feel that we were
No.
neglected during the war at all.
And I never felt neglected or impoverished during the Depression.
Even though we were poor, but we didn't know it.
But that's when Dad worked so many jobs.
Yeah.
He wallpapered, he did plumbing,
Yeah,
he worked at Bethlehem Steel, but he had to do all of those things in order, and he only had 3 kids.
right.
But then he also had all his brothers and sisters who worked, but still he was helping to support them too,
Yes, he
when they
was.
would come.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
well, and Helen came and went to nursing school at Johns Hopkins in order to learn to be a nurse and anesthesiologist.
Yeah,
No, that's the doctor, nurse anesthetist. And then the whole unit from
John?
the hospital, they went as a unit to Australia to take care of the soldiers and so on. That's where she met her husband over there, John Flatley. And they were married in Australia, which was but I think that probably happened frequently during the war.
Or he was American or no?
Oh, he's
From Oregon.
He was an American, but he was in the service, and he was a patient of hers. And then they also, and we've got pictures and
Yeah, he was
things
a
of their
captain.
wedding.
John Flatley, right.
So
Right.
who came over from Ireland?
Who did?
Oh, our grandfather, in fact, I am tracing that now. Peter Dolan, who was our grandfather, came over in 1878. Isn't that what it said?
I think so.
1878, and his wife came later. And I have all this information up there. And he came from County Cavan, and Grandma Dolan came from County Cork. And I have a lot of information on that. But unfortunately, our mother, who came from Donegal, whose name was O'Donnell, O'Donnell is like Smith in the United States.
So
And
is Dolan in,
yeah, and we
But
don't
our
know that.
parents came? So your grandparents on her side and
yes, we
Grand-
have,
that side?
Yeah,
our 4 grandparents are all
From Ireland.
immigrants.
yeah.
We're 100%
Yeah.
Irish.
Right, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think some of the other things that during the war, but that's all right, I forgot it.
Yeah, that's enough.
Right,
But really and truly, having just gone to
Okay,
that
I know.
homeless place, you stop to think about that and that what's going on in the world right now with the homelessness and the lack of food, and because we had the food pantries and that kind of stuff. We lived through the Great Depression.
We
We
didn't
never
have-
knew it.
Yeah, I can still remember when I felt really rich. In our kitchen, they got a clock and put it between the dining room and the kitchen, and it was one that went flip, flip. Do you remember that? Wow, it was an electric clock that did that. And the other remembrance I have was I thought I'm going to bake a cake. So I baked a cake, except it didn't get any higher than this. So I baked a
I don't
second
think
one.
it was even that thick.
So I baked a second one and icinged it and baked it so it was finally about like this high. And Uncle Muggs came in and said, "Oh, I'll have a piece of that." And of course it was like this. That was my first cooking experience.
Right,
Oh
right.
dear.
He used to tease us a
Yeah,
lot.
but we had a good time. I used to go down the alley to see Teresa, Mary Teresa Cortez, who I went to school with.
Right.
Yeah. And we rode the bike, and unfortunately, my older sister would ride ahead of us.
Go ahead, Ann.
Huh? You get her. Anyhow, yes, and I tried to catch up with her and couldn't do it very often.
Before we moved, the year that Pap moved got the job in Toledo. Okay, he moved in January, but I was a senior in high school, and Mary Frances was in 8th grade. And so we stayed, Nana and the 3 girls stayed until June so that I could graduate and she could graduate. So then, that's when we moved to Toledo. And in the meantime, Pap found a house for us, and
What
'cause
prompted his move? What job? Or what did he do before?
Uncle Tom got him this job with American Floor Surfacing Machine Company. He was hired as the manager, and then he ended up being president of the company. But prior to that, he had these inventions and things at the Bethlehem Steel Company, where he worked. And so he had drive. He had a drive that
Right.
nobody else I've ever known had the kind of drive that he had.
And
Because remember, he only went to 8th grade,
6th grade,
6th grade, right?
6th grade.
Nana graduated or
8th grade.
8th grade, but he only went to 6th grade, that's right. But so he was a self-educated man, actually. And that's why he had all those books that I had to get rid of eventually.
Did you get rid of them all? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
What he did, and it was correspondence schools, where he learned the plumbing, he learned the electricity, he learned art, he learned all that stuff through this correspondence school.
And taught himself English. He was an
Right.
avid reader. I mean, because he spoke well, so he could. And you know what? They'd say, "Well, what school did you graduate from?" And he'd say, "The school."
Maryland Institute of Technology, because when he's hiring these engineers.
And there's no such place.
Right,
But then he would say to us, "School of Hard Knocks,"
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyhow, that's when we moved to Toledo, was that year. So that was in,
And she then went into the University of Toledo, and I went into Notre Dame.
right.
And I still remember being interviewed to go into Notre Dame, and I'm going like this. Pap's going, don't do that. Oh, dear.
So, and we lived right down the street from the university,
Yeah.
was the house, so it was,
And Aunt Barbara
well, not
went.
when I was going, I was over on Prospect, or not,
Yeah, Prospect, that's where we were.
But then
I went-
they eventually moved over to
Meadowwood.
Meadowwood.
Yeah,
right.
but on Prospect is where you were, and that's where you were
And
married
I was
from.
married from there, right.
Right. And Aunt Barbara went into 7th grade at St. Anne's. Curses. It was terrible. The neglected child will never forget that she didn't get to stay. But it was very hard for Nana because all of her friends, you make
Yeah.
friends when your children are in school. And to move at that stage of high school and college, it was very difficult for Nana. But she made good friends after a
Right.
while in Toledo. It was-
You mean in Baltimore? Well, see, I never lived on Meadowwood. I
Who's the
got-
neighbor next door that's...
Oh, Professor Jones.
O. Garfield Jones, who wrote the procedure for, what do you call it, when you have a meeting, something of orders.
Robert's Rules of
Robert's
Robert's Rules of
He
Order.
wrote that, and we still have it, and we still use it. It's, his book is
It's
still.
used at all different
all the
organizations
time.
now.
Probably, they're using it right now in Washington DC.
Could be,
But
could be.
it was, yeah, he lived next door to us.
Right. Yep,
And then we went on to high school and college.
college, and that's where I met my husband. Yeah,
That's where I met my husband and got married.
and now
Yeah,
we have grandchildren.
right.
I have 13 grandchildren. And you have
7.
7. So see, we are very prolific. Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.